Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Ref the District. I'm Nathan Perry, and joining me, it's the Stoner. We're going to give you a rundown on the Washington Nationals season as it's going to coming up. We're excited. They are, in fact, the defending champions of a 162 game winning, year by default. Atlanta happened to only have 161 games before they won last year. So no longer the full season champions. There was a full season, but got that little tiny asterisk at least.
Little
for
caveat.
It. So, and we're not going to break this down by ourselves now, are we, Stoner?
No, we're not very good at that. We need an expert for that.
And who are we bringing in today for our Nats preview?
We're going to bring in Jesse Dougherty. He is the beat reporter of the Washington Nationals for the Washington Post. So we're extremely happy to have Jesse in here with us right now. Thank you, Jesse.
Yeah, guys. Thanks for having me. Oh, and the applause. That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah, absolutely. And we're going to hook you up to the big screen here. Put you right there, all set. And yeah, thanks again for joining us, Jesse. And let me know if I'm wrong here. I'm not 100% sure. Was 2019, which was the World Series winning year, and was that your very first year covering the Nats as a beat reporter?
Yeah, it was my first full season. So I started in August of 18, but otherwise your research is spot on.
That's right. And then you wrote a book called Buzzsaw that you can get anywhere out there, wherever books are sold.
Yep.
And that was basically recapping the 2019 World Series winning season. Yep. Tell us a little bit about the book and kind of what goes into putting something like that together, a book like that. Really, again, in your first year of really covering the team.
Good luck, Jon.
Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, I appreciate you asking. It's like 2 years almost to the day. It came out on March 20th, 2020. So if anyone can do some thinking about what was happening that week, people weren't quite focused on buying books. They were focused on trying to figure out how many groceries they need to buy because they couldn't go outside. So it's fun to hear you say, like, go buy it in person, because frankly, we were really reliant on online sales for like a year and a half. I was telling someone today at spring training, like, I've barely even signed books because human interaction has been largely limited. So it was fun, man. I mean, like, it was like a day after the World Series ended. So I think it ended on a Wednesday, I believe, maybe a Thursday, one of the two. And the day after, an editor at Simon & Schuster, who I knew a bit through a friend, emailed me with, like, subject line, like, you want to write a book? I was like, sure.
And your first book, right?
Yeah, first book. Yeah. Hopefully not my last, but my first one. And the thing is, like, at that point, like, you're still running on adrenaline, right? Like, so I'm not saying at all, like, I regret this in any way, but, like, post World Series, it's like if you asked Ryan Zimmerman after Game 7 if he would run a marathon, he probably would have said yes. It's like, but so it sort of feels like I was like, yeah. And then Monday came around and I'm like, oh, I have to write this, right? Like, I have to write this in like 6 weeks. So
yeah,
it was crazy, man. It was fun. It was challenging. It made me want to do it again. Whatever form that takes, I don't know. But I mean, really, to kind of give you a bit of insight, like, it's a book about the season, but it's really about all the kind of characters that went into it. So it's a lot of backstories. The chapters are sort of broken up into like little mini biographies, so to speak, on like Juan Soto and Steven Strasburg and Sean Doolittle and Dave Martinez and Mike Rizzo and Anthony Rendon and on down the list. Didn't quite hit everybody, but most of the major players and even some you might not expect are in there. So I think in some ways it's timeless in the sense that it's a Washington baseball story and it's a baseball story about how to win a World Series. But yeah, it's certainly rooted in 2019. And for anyone who wants to relive that again, it's there for you.
Well, that was a pretty epic season. This year, though, expectations are a little different as they head into this one. Probably the first time in a decade, the Nationals aren't looking to be contenders. Does that change the vibe in spring training, or how is the vibe down there?
No, frankly, I think it's a little bit more laid back, honestly. Like, and that might anger people to hear. And I don't want to make it seem like they're just like, not trying or they're not doing drills like usual. I mean, maybe they're doing even more so because it's a younger roster. But I think expectations when you're really good make a good vibe. I think expectations when you're not quite as good as you should be, or people think you are, create tension. And I think the last two seasons, to be frank, were more that than having expectations like for like maybe the 2015 team that obviously ended up, in the gutter, or the 2019 team that came out of the gate really bad, really poorly. Those teams had expectations for the right reasons. I mean, they built these amazing rotations. They made a lot of smart signings on the fringes. They had, they had deep bullpens. I think in the 2020 offseason, there was a lot of like bringing guys back from the World Series team. You re-signed Howie Kendrick, you re-signed Asdrubal Cabrera, you re-signed Daniel Hudson, Steven Strasburg, which obviously has been sort of faithful here. And then 2021, it sort of felt like they were trying to maximize this window, which I kind of thought was like a Max Scherzer window, where they knew that they had this one last year of this amazing Hall of Fame bound ace, and they sort of patched together the roster with a bunch of one-year deals. But if you're serious about winning a World Series, your main offseason isn't built around Jon Lester, Kyle Schwarber, Josh Bell, and Brad Hand. It doesn't mean those guys are bad players. And frankly, like Schwarber worked out really well, and Brad Hand and Schwarber both net you results at this trade deadline. And Josh Bell's been a good find as well. But it's just like those are moves you make like on top of like getting a big guy. And in the past, like let's think pre-2019, Nationals went out and got Patrick Corbin. They haven't given out a contract that big to an outside player since then. So I think the optics have changed a bit. So I think like it's more laid back than past years because there's more recognition of what this team is. Whereas I think in the last two springs, it was a bit of an imposter syndrome on being like true contenders.
And talking about that payroll, the payroll is a big deal in baseball and in every sport really. But back in 2019, the payroll was about 170 to 175 million dollars, and now it's all the way down to like 114, give or take, depending on how you do the math. Is this a concerted effort by the Lerners and Rizzo to cut payroll, or is this something, or are we building what kind of we're hoping for is to sign bigger guys or to sign Soto? Because that's a huge drop from only a couple of years ago.
No, it certainly is.
From 172 to 114. That's a huge drop, and to not fill that void with big names or big contracts. Is that a concerted effort, do you think, by ownership?
So I think you're going to get like a bit of a window in my brain here, which is like, I think about this a lot, and because it's really hard for me to figure out like what's cutting payroll, right? And just doing it for the sake of like knowing you're not going to compete for World Series, so not spending to get close. And then what's actually like concerted, planned out, deliberate rebuild. And I think there's a difference between those two things. And the result can be the same, right? The result can be a payroll around 150 million, give or take, but depending on what you're doing. So the argument, it's like the devil and the angel to some degree, right? Like the rebuilding angel would say like, it doesn't make sense to sign a guy for 4 years, for 5 years, for 3 years, whatever, until we know what we have in Kay Cavalli, until we know what we have in Jackson Rutledge, until we know what we have in Keibert Ruiz and Riley Adams, until we know what we have in Jackson Clough as an extra infielder, whatever it may be, like Luis Garcia, Carter Kieboom now with the injury, it's a little bit muddier there, but like I could see that, right? If you told me that, and I could understand the logic. Now, also like in sports, which this is where you start to get into sort of like the weird, funky part of my brain. Like I think there is something noble and like important about like trying to go from like 70 wins to 72 wins, and then 72 to 75, and then like I think teams should do that. But like
just build and build.
Right? Like it's like, like the Orioles shouldn't try to win the World Series this year. They shouldn't, but they should try and win 10 more games. And so like, you can like slash payroll, but you could also like pay $15 million for Kenley Jansen and make your bullpen a lot better and just get better. And then maybe you flip them the deadline and it helps your rebuild. But you could like, I think there's something intrinsic about what you like owe your fans and your fan base that like it matters to try and get better. And I think the Nationals did. Like I think like in some ways, like adding Nelson Cruz is that.
It's big.
Yeah. But leaving the rotation as it is not that. Like at all. And I think that's like the negligent part of this offseason, right? That like you didn't even bring in like one starter on a major league deal with knowing that Strasburg will be a question mark, knowing Joe Ross's elbow was on the fritz going into camp, knowing that Eric Fetty's been, up and down what he is. Like that to me, I think the rotation, which is usually the bedrock of the whole organization, is probably the best indicator of like what this team feels about itself, right? Because like if you're trying to get 10 wins better, 6 wins better, 5 wins better, whatever, which is hard to do, you're adding to that rotation and you're getting probably more than you did in your bullpen. and you're probably looking at the corner outfield and shortstop and third base more seriously than starting Maikel Franco on opening day, right? Like that doesn't quite cut it. So I don't know if I answered your question, but I think like, but yeah, are they slashing? Yes, like technically they are spending less money, right?
Mm-hmm.
But is it slashing payroll or is it rebuilding? I think it's some of both.
Some of both. Okay.
Yeah, because if I'm an owner and I'm like, we're not going to win, well then I'll save $25 million. If you tell me honestly right now we don't have a chance to win the World Series, like I'm not saying that conversation has been had, but just in theory. But no, I think about this all the time. Like, what is the plan and what's just like bad faith, ownership tendencies?
Sure. Yeah.
It's a great question. It is frankly, it's the question, I think.
Well, you mentioned one of the trades or a couple of the trades that happened last year. This team's going in without Scherzer, without Turner. They got a couple, they got some prospects in return. You mentioned Ruiz. How is he and how's Josiah Gray fit into this Nationals team?
Yeah, I mean, I think they're headliners. And I think that's, if you're thinking of ways to get excited about this year, I think there are two of them. I think we saw more of Gray last year. We maybe understand a bit more of what he is, at least at this stage of his career. Ruiz is a bit of a question mark, not talent-wise, just we haven't seen him a lot. And 30 games of a catcher at the end of a weird year when he switched organizations is like not going to yield much, I think. So breaking them down individually, I think Gray's super interesting and intriguing. He's a fly ball pitcher in a home run era, so there's risks there. Can it work? Sure. I mean, a good example is Max Scherzer. I don't want to put that on him, but it's gone pretty well for him. And he'll be good, and he'll be the second or third starter in the rotation. If he stays healthy, he'll get 25 plus starts for the most part. And then Ruiz, I mean, I'm super intrigued by. I think he's immensely talented. He was the blue chip of that trade for sure. I mean, ask anybody, that's the guy they wanted. And Josiah came into the picture once they were able to package the two guys together. But if you're just, I think we as we've reported, like you can look at Keibert Ruiz and think of Trea Turner as the return. And then you can look at Josiah Gray and think of Max Scherzer. So there, you kind of pair those up. So in theory, like the 27-year-old shortstop with next year team control should yield a better player than the 37-year-old ace who's on an expiring contract. It's just like, just logically. So Ruiz, I think expectations should be higher and the return should be greater than Gray. And switch hitting catcher, a lot more power from the left side right now. Really high contact. I think he fits really well behind Soto, Cruz, and Bell because a guy who hits the ball in the air a lot and makes a lot of contact is going to suit well there, whether it's, getting runners in from third or just putting the ball in the air in the outfield. A high ground ball rate guy would be tough there. I think that just is a recipe for a lot of double plays, but he battled that in the minors a little bit. A lot of rolled over ground balls. He's fixed that in his swing. At least last year he did. His power numbers really spiked in AAA. So I'm intrigued. I'm intrigued by that 2, 3, 4, 5 for sure, or whatever it is. But other than that, I'm not too intrigued.
Do you think they feel that pressure, the two of them, knowing that they came from Scherzer and Turner, two cornerstones of this franchise? Do they feel it? Do you guys kind of let them know when you ask them questions?
I think we let them know probably more than they think about it. I mean, because I don't know. I struggle with this a lot. Like they're going to be what they are. Like, right? It doesn't matter. Like, it doesn't matter. You could be traded for Babe Ruth, but you only can be as good as you are, right?
Sure.
So, and I think both those guys, like, you need to be so mega motivated to become a professional athlete, right? And so self-critical and so, like, we talk a lot about natural talent. Like, I think maybe like 1 in 100,000 of these guys is like, truly just going off natural talent. Otherwise, like, they're maniacs. And if they're not expecting that of themselves to be great and to make money and to provide for their families for generations to come, like that's the real problem, right? Yeah. Not that they're caving under the pressure of Scherzer and Turner as the tree result. I think it's more so that they wouldn't be self-motivated. And for everything I know they are, but I think it's certainly fun for us to talk about, and I'll do it all year. But yeah, I don't know. Internally, I'm not sure how much it's felt.
And then kind of on the opposite side of that was almost a throw-in trade with the Lane Thomas for Jon Lester. If I remember correctly, that might have even been announced like after the deadline. Nobody really knew. Yeah. And it was kind of a throw-in, and Lane Thomas seems to have locked down that left field spot. Is that kind of a surprise that he's come in kind of a throw-in trade?
Yeah.
and become an everyday player, a starter, a corner outfielder at that.
Yeah, I mean, I remember sitting in the Nats Park press box and an ESPN reporter broke the trade, and I asked one of my sources, I typed in PTNBL, player to be named later. I think I messed those up. PT, whatever. And I question mark, and a source of mine, and they said Lane Thomas. And I said, I've heard of him. Like, it was like really surprising, right? Like, I didn't know a lot about him. And frankly, I think St. Louis was going to DFA him anyway, which just then it made sense to like get something for him. And actually, Lester pitched pretty well down the stretch for them. So like, I don't know if it was like some big joke that maybe it felt like that the Nats sort of landed this heist on Lester. I think it might have been a player they were discarding either way and figured they'd get some value. But yeah, I mean, it's surprising to me. I think I'm probably more surprised that Victor Robles wound up in the minors last year than I am that Lane Thomas was in center. But they're connected, so you can't disengage those two things. But yeah, I mean, admitting a top prospect needs more minor league seasoning for a month, 3 years into his big league career that's a big deal. That decision doesn't get made lightly. It's not just like, oh yeah, send him down. Like that's a massive deal. That's a starter on the World Series team. That's a former top prospect in the league, not just in the organization. So, I mean, that's the domino effect to Thomas getting this like sort of prolonged shot in center and playing really well. I imagine this year he'll start in left, and Robles will start in center to begin the year. Robles is way better defender, I think. Which is important to remember than Thomas. But yeah, Thomas was good, man. He surprised me for sure, and obviously he surprised me just in the mere fact of existing on the roster in the first place. So.
Well, you brought up Robles. Is that disappointing that he's not blossomed into what we were expecting and wanting? I mean, is this something? Is it over for him, or can we kind of get back to what we're hoping he would be?
Yeah. So the weird thing with him is like to this point, like I think about him and Keibert a lot in tandem because they came up around the same age, and right now they're in a similar boat. Keibert is hurt, but they're in a similar boat of underachieving compared to what you'd expect from a top prospect. And the thing with Carter, and this will circle back to Robles, but the thing with Carter is that like to this point in the majors, he hasn't shown it. And so you could say, well, I'm not writing him off for good, but you could say like maybe he was not worthy of a first round pick. And that's okay. Like that happens, that there's misses, and especially in the 20s, right? He wasn't a 1-1. He was he was later in the first round. But that you can say that because it's all we've seen is inconsistent play at the major league level. Robles was a functional, productive, flawed, but like functional and productive center fielder on a World Series team. So the weird thing there is like we've seen it. So it's not like it's not there. And that's what's so confounding about the situation is that like the fact that you can go from being a contributor on a title winning team and being like sorely missed. Michael A. Taylor played well in the NLCS, but like everyone was like, whoa, we're missing Robles. Like that was a big deal. It wasn't just like, yeah, like fine. That was a big deal when he was out for some of that series. To go from that to talking about him not even making the opening day roster in 2022 is like, that's a jarring shift. So I'm still trying to figure out as a reporter, as someone who covers a team, like what happens there? Is that a coaching staff gaffe? Is that Robles' personal responsibility? Is that, I guess that's the two options, but like it's pretty confounding. And I think like largely, I think these guys have to hit the ball and throw the ball and pitch the ball. I think I probably trend more toward like blaming them, so to speak, than like coaches and coaching staff. But it feels like something's missing here when that guy has done it at such a high level and now can't. And we'll see this year if he gets his shot early on. But like in spring right now, like he doesn't have a hit in an exhibition. And we're talking, we were on, late March. So we'll see. But it's weird. I mean, it's weird.
So we've gone almost 20 minutes now, and we've buried the lead. We've kind of the what's that when somebody's in the room, the elephant in the room, right? What are the chances? What would you give the chances of the Nats re-signing Juan Soto or signing Juan Soto to a long-term deal before he hits free agency? Because I think if he hits free agency, he's gone. I mean, Boris is gonna do what he's gonna do, but can they get him signed before he gets there?
See, I think.
You think the opposite. You think that if he gets to free agency, he'll come back?
I think there's a better chance. Obviously there's a better chance. Well, there's 100% chance if he signs before free agency, he comes back to the Nationals if he signs, right? Because there's no other option. No one's bidding. But I think there's probably a better chance he comes back in free agency than they get an extension before then. I think he wants to test the market. The only way in which this changes is if he has a horrible year.
Yeah, which he's not going to do.
Which I don't think he's going to do.
He's almost incapable of doing that.
Right. I don't think he's going to do that. But I mean, like, really, like, if he hit, if he just like cratered, right? Or even came back down to earth like a little bit, or like a good bit, like not even crater, but like became like an average player, then you're like, could they dangle enough money to get him? No, probably, because he probably would like to correct the market, I think, right? But if he stays on this pace, he wants to go to free agency, he wants to get the bidding war. And then I think we're getting the situation like was kind of the thought with Bryce, which I know gives everyone like PTSD and the shakes, but like was kind of the thought with Bryce that like if there was an offer on the table, like the Nationals in the end would be asked if they wanted to like go $1 over, right? Like it doesn't, like in the end, like I think they had made an offer over the winter that was so much lower than the Phillies offer that didn't happen because it was just very clear like what kind of waters they were swimming in and what kind of waters Bryce wanted to swim in. They were just very different. But if the Nationals at that point had like cleared Trea Turner off the books, if it gets all the way free agency, Patrick Corbin's off the books. That's $24 million a year. Steven Strasburg, you're getting closer to him coming off, so you can like project your payroll for the next it might be 13 years into the future, and you can structure it solely around this guy. So maybe they do, bite on, hey, he loves it there. He loves, living there. He doesn't want to move. This is all just hypothetical, but like,
sure,
we have this offer from New York. We have this offer from LA. We have this offer from Chicago, wherever it is. Notice I pick cities that have two teams. And we want to know if you want to go $1 over. Like, I think that to me is more likely to happen than they get this done before he goes to the market.
All right. Well, Strasburg is the other big contract that's on the books. No one's going to blame.
It's signed already.
Yeah. No one's going to blame them for really, paying him because he had a great year. Obviously was the, World Series MVP, one of the best pitchers in playoffs, as far as that's concerned. Obviously we're a little biased on there. Davey mentioned getting him 20 to 25 starts. What do you think we can expect out of Strauss, this season, especially that he's going to be playing a lot less than what normal star pitchers would be doing at like 30 plus games. So what do we expect from Strasburg?
Yeah. So I think if you count out 25 starts, and the company line is that they want him to start and not stop. So that means you're starting late, which we already know, but 25 is like early May, and then early to mid-May, and then 20 is like mid-June.
Yeah.
So like the low end of that projection would be like starting in mid-June, and that assumes he just goes till the end or would try to. So I think like that quote, 20, 25 starts, actually gave us a pretty good blueprint for what they're looking at. They're looking in somewhere in that range. If you cut it the difference, he's probably debuting in late May. And frankly, I think we talk about him so often, and to this point of his career, he's earned this, that we talk about him as if he'll be productive and dominant, frankly, if he's on the mound. Like that's been the assumption, right? Like that's always been it. Like, well, if he's healthy, we're good. We don't know that anymore. Like, first of all, like what is healthy? What is his arsenal? What is his velocity? What pitcher is he like? How far can he go into games? Carpal tunnel neuritis surgery is no joke. Clearly, there's I don't know this. This is totally not diagnosing him, but like there could be ripple effects to what he dealt with last year, which ends up being season-ending surgery, and maybe it shifted around his routine, and I don't know. Like I think these domino effects of these injuries is going to take a toll on him and his arm and his shoulder and his entire body. So when you ask what I expect, like I think there's probably no bigger question mark on this roster than what will it look like when he's pitching again.
Yeah.
We don't know. We frankly, like there's no way to know. He doesn't know. I don't think.
Yeah.
He's in a mound and throwing 110% and trying to get guys out in a major league level. there's no way to know that. And I know Mike Rizzo said this to me in November at the GM meetings. Like and it makes sense. He's like, I'd much rather it be Tommy John surgery, even if the rehab was longer, because we know that. We know what it looks like on the other side, right? But like surgery for thoracic outlet syndrome, like it's uncharted waters for most people, mostly because it's so highly individualized. What surgery you get, what kind of part of the body addressed. But also, like, there's so many cases and scary cases of guys never being quite right again. So I think like the evidence would point that way instead of saying he'll make a full recovery and just be dominant again, like he was in 2019 during the playoff run. It's a huge unknown.
Well, before we get you out of here, Jesse, the last thing we wanted to talk about is, do you know that it snowed today here in the DMV area? And you're down there in West Palm. Is that where you're staying?
Yeah, I was gonna say, I should like sat by like a palm tree or something.
All right. So what sort of routine do you have? I mean, do you get a chance to like go to the beach, and do you get to go to like these cool little picnic restaurants, or what do they call them? Like these little tropical spots.
Yeah.
You're sitting outside on the beach and all that.
Yeah.
Make us feel jealous for sitting here in the snow today.
I'm not a big beach person. The most thing I can make you feel jealous of is like I stand by a baseball field all day in the perfect weather and like, watch guys play baseball, right? They call it work. But no, I would say like I'd always joke about this. Everyone's like, what are you doing? Are you going to the beach? I'm like, I need a beach day in August. Like now, like I'm revved up, like we're like the season's coming, like maybe call me corny 4 years into the beat or whatever it is, but like I'm still as revved up as ever to cover what's going on. It's like I need that day when I'm like 20 games in 20 days in July or whatever it is. Like then I would like to come down here for a couple of days and sit at the tiki restaurant. Don't get me wrong.
That's what I was trying to think of. A tiki restaurant.
Don't get me wrong. We have a good time and get some good meals and sit outside and whatnot. And it's certainly not snowing here, but no, I'd take West Palm maybe a bit later in the year for sure.
Jess, thanks so much for dropping by with us and talking to us about the upcoming season. This is normally Nathan's part right here, but I jumped in there and botched it all up. He's really smooth about it, but I'll just say thank you for doing all that. Again, it's Jesse Dougherty. He's the Nats beat writer for the Washington Post. And of course, he has the book called Buzzsaw that chronicles the 2019 World Series winning season. You can find that anywhere that you find books. And Jess, again, we really appreciate you stopping by.
Yeah, of course, guys. Thanks so much for having me.
And until next time,
what's that?
Be a fan.